Maybe give us very briefly an idea in what kind of setup you were working initially at KONUX.
Back at the time, I would have said, I had the greatest mentors of the world, like Andy, Michael Baum, and all the leading VCs. I think my own journey in building KONUX was perceived as quite successful, raising lots of money, getting different roles at the World Economic Forum, spending time with all head of states. But in the inside, I was more and more kind of building a distance to myself.
I saw this panel from Michael Baum and this notion of a venture athlete. That actually really resonated with me because I was feeling, hey, if you look at professional athletes, they have an entire support system around them.
If you burn out as a CEO, 50% with a 50% probability your startup will fail. Complete write-off. The whole thing is you're not helping the company if you burn out. I think even if you can't do it for yourself, then just do it for the company, because the company will be in a very bad space.
How do you actually build ventures for tomorrow's consumer? Or how do you build ventures that make the human experience more human, right?
AI is just giving you the tools, but the question is, where do you fuel that energy? It's not good or bad. It's just human consciousness decides, like fire, right? You can heat up your house and cook a nice meal, or you can burn cities. You choose human consciousness.
Welcome to Be Well. Today we're joined by Andy Loy, Andreas. He's co-founder and former CEO of KONUX, one of Europe's leading AI scale-ups. Before turning 30, he created more than 500 million in shareholder value, raised over 180 million euros, and built an outstanding team that's transforming railway infrastructure across the world. But at the peak of this success, Andy's heart literally forced him to stop. And that moment became quite pivotal for him. And very, very exciting story that you'll be sharing with us, Andy, and very exciting that you're here. And maybe a personal anecdote. I met your partner, Michael, during the Start conference, and he was actually talking about the concept of the venture athlete. And that really resonated with me back then at the summit. And I didn't know how I would come back to Michael in some shape or form. But this is now a full circle moment. So I'm very excited to have you here with us. And before talking more about your current mission and what excites you right now, I'd be very interested in hearing more about your background. What made you to the person you are today? Maybe give us a brief introduction. How do you even introduce yourself to people nowadays?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much for the introduction. I think I'm me. This was probably my best introduction. Now, I think what made me and the person that I'm today is quite a longer story, but I try to keep it short. I think back at the time, I would have said, I had the greatest mentors of the world, like Andy, Michael Baum, and all the leading VCs that guided me, and I'm grateful for their input. But I think the person that I'm today, I think the biggest shape and form probably had my family, my mother, that always showed me that kind of unconditional love, and that I'm just amazing the way I am, and not that I don't need to be somebody else. And but that brings me back to my journey. I always, when I was studying information systems at Technical University of Munich and Stanford University in California, when I started KONUX, I always wanted to be like the shining stars of Silicon Valley, like back at the time, Larry Page and Elon, and try to be more like the perfect CEO, the perfect founder, the perfect whatever. Poster child, and ultimately, I think my own journey in building KONUX was what from the outside was perceived as quite successful, of raising lots of money, scaling internationally, becoming like getting different roles at the World Economic Forum, spending time with all head of states that were relevant back at that time. But in the inside, I think I was pretty much, and this was what you're referring to, my heart that led me somewhere else with 29. I was more and more kind of building a distance to myself. What I mean by that is I think I wasn't listening to my body at all. I was just trying to be in hustle mode and saying like, I don't need to sleep. Other people don't, like the best people don't sleep. And then with 29, I had just a normal doctor's checkup. And when I was at that checkup, it turned out that my heart was stopped beating like 1,000 times a day. And so I had a serious, let's say, damage in my autonomous nervous system. And then the doctors basically said, do you have a stressful job? And I said, just raised our Series C, like very big round, and was trying to like, I want to go the IPO path. And I was like, yeah, kind of. And they were like, yeah, maybe for the next few years, you don't work at all. And I'm like, so I went to another doctor because I was just like, that's not that's not what I wanted to hear. So I went to another doctor, told me the same story. Went to another doctor because I was like, that can't be my truth. Ultimately, it was my truth. And then, so I actually had to step back for health reasons as CEO and chairman of the business, which was for me, I mean, first of all, my ego crisis, because my whole identity was like, I'm the CEO of KONUX and I need to, and this is what people know me for, like me for, that's my brand. And this is, and then that led me to a whole kind of journey towards first physical health, mental health. And brings me to that circle where you're going is like the whole concept of why, like that I started learning different tools like breathwork, meditation, everything about movement, everything about nutrition. And I was asking myself, why did nobody show that to me earlier? And so because I was learning from like elite athletes and people in the military forces that learn all that stuff as part of their daily life, right? Or athletes that have a nutrition trainer, sleep trainer. And so I was like, why isn't there anything like that for CEOs or for founders back at that time? And yeah, I mean, this is just kind of what motivated me and then Michael to start the Yoke Foundation later on to help the next generation and share those tools as in a non-profit format, helping them to really helping founders that want to create impactful technology startups to sustainably perform, because it's all about sustainable performance, right? And I think I try to perform and force it. But it didn't come from from power, it came from force. Every day I was pushing instead of just being really centered and with that clarity. Usually, I mean, from clarity there comes output, there comes productivity, and not from the hours I put in. And I just completely didn't get that concept of how do I leverage my energy versus how do I leverage my time? And I was optimizing my calendar. And I think my beloved EA Lena from back at the time and a good friend, she can sing a song about that, because she always thought I'm crazy because I tried to do like 15-minute meetings, no breaks, and yeah, I mean, this was quite severe. Instead of really focusing, what is my superpower? How can I leverage that to be in service of the company? But I think also I was so much in my ego that I was probably more in service of myself than probably in service of the company, but also pretty much in service of myself. And I think that's kind of that's something I'm doing now currently completely differently, in multiple ways.
Amazing. We should have included your former EA in the podcast. I think she would have had some interesting
Yeah,
insights.
this would be fun. No, she deserves her own podcast. Yeah. She can tell you the craziness of all founders of KONUX.
Okay. Insane. That's great. Andy, thank you for that introduction. I mean, I think we could talk for hours for that journey that you experienced, right? That transition from being an overworked founder, burning out, and then also maybe being reborn in a sense. Could you maybe briefly tell us, maybe if you look back to your former self, early 20s, very ambitious, which is great, right? I mean, in general, you want to do something, you're active, but how have your values changed during that time? How do you reflect your values that you're having or that you are prizing right now or praising right now in comparison to the ones you had earlier? How would you compare that?
This is an excellent question. I think the aspect of like we are here to like I think as humans, I mean we're born to create, right? It's not that we are. I wouldn't say it's like you can also. It's just the question is how do you create, right? How do you create a new company? How do you tap into whatever is your personal mission or your personal vision in this life? I think it really comes. I think we're here to do something right on this planet. Otherwise, I think it would be very meaningless. That doesn't mean that everybody has to build a huge company. It can, like, your purpose can kind of translate and flow in different forms. I think for me, what was more of my like I would say my values, even if they weren't explicit at that point, they were like, I want to see results. Like I focus on results. It's like results, even though I didn't celebrate them. But this was results. This was one of the big values. I think the other one is that I think I embraced that hustle culture a lot. So I was actually judgmental probably a lot about people that work less hours, but not about like less out. So the focus was just very much, I would say, immature in many in that form, because there was a part of I want to see results, but I also expect a lot of hours. But ultimately, that's what matters, right? If you create leverage, if you create something that is kind of of meaningful value, if you spend 10 hours doing it 100 hours, and I mean, look, nowadays with all the amazing AI tools that we have, right? As soon as you know what you want, then it's so easy, right? Because it helps you bring clarity. It helps you create that stuff and draft that stuff in just, I think in today's world, the more you're present, the more you're have the clarity of what you need and what questions to ask is so much more value than just putting in more time, right? So I think, so that's kind of the me being like focusing also on like trying to get to people, not because of that human being that they are, just rather because they're famous and I want to be associated. And so this was more like, I would say there was that was more of that ego version, and I think it's just a more immature version, which is probably in 10 years when we have this podcast again, I'm like, yeah, then this was my 20-year-old, this was my 30-year-old, and now I totally get life. That's not true. I mean, I'm still on the journey. I'm I'm learning every day. But I think today, if you ask me what are my values, I actually, it is so funny because if you ask me, I have them actually in my journey, in my journal. The first page is my values, and I just read them. So I have cross, which means gratitude. So I value my life experience every day and try to share that energy. And then response, that means I respond with love to life and act from my center. That means every second. For me, that means every single time anything happens in life, you have a chance. And the chance is, how do you respond? Somebody can shout at you and you can shout back, or you just may take a breath and then it's like, wow, that's a lot of emotions. Maybe how can I help you? However we choose our reactions, but mostly they come like we are in this reactive mode, right? And so I try to consciously be more in a responding mode. So I made this even to a part of my values where I try to remember myself every day. Another one is optimism. So I see the bigger picture, creating sustainable win-win-win solutions for humanity and the planet. That means I think ultimately it's not about, because I'm involved in different nonprofit projects all around children, next gen leaders, or our planet. I can talk about it later if you like, but for me, it's like there's a win, and a win is there's in most cases in my life, there was always not only a win-win, but a win-win-win, because it's not only because for you and me, but also for the planet and society. And I think what I tried to do in my coming back to my 20-year-old was more of like, how can I win? But if I win and focus on optimizing that, I don't optimize for the greater win that is, I think, exists, or there shouldn't be a deal, or there shouldn't be that venture or something. So I think in most of the cases, there is this win-win-win. So that's optimism. Then I have that aspect of surrender, and then I just one more. And surrender means I trust that life gives me what I need, not what I want, right? It's like if you have a severe heart issue, it's not what you want, but it's what I needed, right? And I try to surrender and accept and learn and grow from that new part of reality. And I mean, this was only one of the things that happened that were very severe in my life. And every time looking backwards, it makes total sense. And I needed that. And even talking about near-death experiences and stuff, I always had this, looking backwards, is this exactly what I needed? Because it reshaped me. And then the last and maybe one of the most powerful ones here is service. And service means I support beings whenever it feels energetically sustainable. That means also when somebody reaches out for a podcast and I have a lot of things to do and a lot of things to, and I'm just like, no, I mean, it depends on if I feel that energy, I just want to be of service, right? Of other human beings and our planet. And this is where I put a good portion of my own energy in. But the important part in that value is sustainable, because if it's not sustainable, I give myself up, and then I don't, and instead of giving myself in, or Hingabe versus Aufgabe.
It's amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that. I mean, it's also valuable for me, insanely valuable to hear that. One thing I was wondering, I mean, because you talk a lot about surrender and you mentioned it a lot. Does it come from that book? Because I read recently The Surrender Experiment from Michael Singer. Is it related
I
to
love
that?
that. I love that. I love
Okay,
that.
okay.
But this is actually
Is that
one of
how-
that. But it shaped me, and I tell you how it shaped me. It's because it's
Okay.
so significant. And then you should give the context of the book. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was like, when I read this book, I was in a state of, you need to imagine, like we did great secondaries and everything. So I was like in a position of my life where I had, like, I didn't have my health, but I had everything that people wanted, right? Fame, money, and all of that. So when I read this book, I was in a state, which was 2 years later, where I healed myself in terms of I had no more issues in any way. No doctor could find any like any heart outage or anything. And I was probably the most healthiest version compared to my 20s with 31. So I was sitting there, just meditating, just enjoying life on the beach, just being in pure love with life and bliss. And I just promised myself, I will never do anything again. So I was just completely retired. So then I read the Surrender Experiment, and I was like, I was like first neglecting it, and I was like, and then I couldn't, something in myself I wasn't that blissful anymore at a certain point in terms of just by being. And so I said to myself, okay, the next time, because I said no to everything, to every business opportunity, to everything where I had to like step back into business. And then I was reading that book, and I was like, okay, Michael, what does this universe want to tell me? So I was like, the first call, a friend, I was donating to a nonprofit called Earthchild Project. And then this lady called me and was like, yeah, it's like we're in trouble. And I was like, okay, I can donate more, but it's not sustainable, right? And I was like, okay, let's build a German entity that we will privately finance with friends. And then it's okay. So first small mini venture, but only non-profit, only pure service, right? 100% of donations go directly to the project. So, okay, first surrender. Then Michael called, and I was like, I have this old foundation, and after all the meditations that you shared with me and everything, we should share it with the next generation. So I'm like dedicating like 50 million of assets, and I'm like, okay, surrender. So, okay, we build up the Yoke Foundation. So, and you're like this, I can tell that story is continuing continuously. with advisory board roles. Then I was returning to KONUX for even some time as the interim CEO again, based on that principle of surrender, because my board was calling me and said, hey, we had to let go of the CEO of the group. And so I was like, okay, what's your plan? And it's like, can you sit down? And I'm like, oh no, 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 no. And I'm like, okay, surrender, right? Because I was like, because I was preaching, hey, you can be all happy, fulfilled, healthy, and have a great life while building. But I wasn't in the position of leading a high complex tech startup in a hot seat environment, right? But so basically, I took this as a surrender experiment of showing I can stay centered and I'm not afraid of, because I'm myself and that's all what I can give and all what I can do. And if I need to raise another couple of millions and do a big turnaround, then maybe that's what universe wants to show me, right? And to step up in that leader and lead from a different place and lead from a more service-oriented place. And I think this journey continues. And I think in Q1, you will see a launch of something that I'm working on for some time, and it's my biggest surrender experiment story probably so far. So no, this is now probably you have to explain what Michael Singer's book is all about. But I mean it definitely shaped my life and even as you see my value systems.
Impressive. Yeah, I mean, I can only share. I actually have a mentor who I visited in Mallorca this summer, and he recommended to read this book. And I was reading it, and I think to put it in a nutshell, I think I'm still trying to process it, but to put it in a nutshell is to follow the flow of life and say yes more. It's interesting because you were saying, I'm not going to do anything. That's very similar to what Michael was doing, right? He was totally happy being isolated in his world, and then he started to exactly do the same thing. So I could totally relate to it. So it must have been really impactful to read that book and realize, hey,
especially in that situation.
Yeah.
I was like, should I?
Exactly.
Like my friend who runs this company called Intelligent Change, Alex Eichen, I think he was actually sending me this book the third time, and I was like, in the beginning, I was like, should I now hate him or should I love him? Now I can just say I love him for that, but in the beginning, it wasn't that easy.
It's amazing, Andy. I think I want to learn a lot more about your current mission and what excites you right now. And obviously, you have this impactful story. Could you maybe just very briefly, and then I want to move on to your current mission, what you're building on Yope, and what your opinions is on, let's say, being a proper entrepreneur and all these things. Maybe give us very briefly an idea in what kind of setup you were working initially at KONUX, right? Just that we have an understanding what you guys did and what the setup was there, so we understand what maybe even triggered that stress and that burnout, and then we will move on to the future and the present.
Very, 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 very happy to dive into the past. Now, I mean, we were students, and I think we were all kind of had a certain ego, and but a lot of drive in that founding team. And I think you can even see now where like the different founders and employees of KONUX. I mean, I think totally built 22 companies. We invest in each other. It's a whole ecosystem that company created over time. But in the beginning, in the early stage, I mean, we were really in a state of like just coming out of university, said, oh, industry 4.0, we want to build the coolest sensor data company for industrial, for all verticals, for all applications. Super lucky because I think nobody really understood what we want to do, not even ourselves, but very driven. And then we met Michael and on an event in Munich, and we just we just followed him and said like we need to talk, and then he invited us to join what is now the Yo program, and 10 years ago, which was called founder.org, and he became our mentor. Then he became our first investor, and while I was in Stanford, also connected to people there, and we had Michael Baum, Andy Bechtolsheim, who's like funded Google, was the mentor of Larry Page, and it's like with all those icons of Silicon Valley investing in us. And then we went back with that money to Germany and said, okay, we built that data company for industrial, just to figure out that this was way more complex, because I mean, still today, some companies trying to build the AI company for industry, not that easy. And so we were super lucky to found, coincidentally, the railway industry, because in the railway industry, compared to other industries, you have one big customer, huge asset base that is highly homogeneous, because over the last 100 years, railways have developed, right? So we started building with our series. So Series C was basically, we had all this money that they gave us, and we learned that everything we built shortly before Series A was basically not really valuable, and we should focus on a complete different market and build from scratch again. And so we were super lucky that NEA believed in that new idea. So then we had to do our first basically turnaround to become a data company for rail. Raised 16 million with that idea, like a new company, because KONUX is actually, the name is KONUX and Lux, because our sensor principle was Lux means light and KONUX means cone. So it was basically optical light sensors, which we never did, but the name is still great, but it just meant something completely different. And then we started building that railway company, and from an IoT company, I would say, building sensors, putting them on track to automate inspections, maintenance needs. We built up that stack to become more of a data machine learning company. And I think today, and maybe also to give the fast forward, so we raised our Series A, I think 2016, 17, and I think 2020, we were at Series C, nearly raised 200 million at that point, and being active in on every continent, and having a China subsidiary, a Japanese subsidiary, Indian subsidiary is like global business, right? And then scaled way too fast, way in a very unhealthy way, but just thought that's the right thing to do. And I mean, today, KONUX I'm still serving on the board, and it's the leading AI platform in the railway industry. But yeah, I think 2021, my heart showed me my purpose, and my job in this world is somewhere differently, and I'm grateful for that. In the moment when I was walking out the doctor's office, I was definitely not grateful.
Interesting. Absolutely. I think we could dive a lot deeper into that transition phase into where you are right now. But it would be interesting, maybe due to time constraints, to talk about Joop and maybe your view on entrepreneurship nowadays. I can maybe share with you. I mentioned earlier I saw this panel from Michael Baum, and this notion of a venture athlete. That actually really resonated with me, because I was feeling, hey, if you look at professional athletes, if you look at, for instance, Bayern Munich, I just was talking to other people in the field, right? If you look at the setup they had, let's say 20, 30 years ago, what kind of support system they have today in comparison to back in the days, it's a different world, right? I mean, they
Yes.
have an entire support system around them that makes sure that you sleep well, that you have mental coaches, that you have physical coaches, physicians, everything. Everything's taken care of, so they can really focus on what matters, and it's performing on the pitch. And by the way, they also get educated in an early way, right? Already when they go to those youth centers to become soccer professionals. They already get educated very early on and mentored and coached. So I have the impression that a lot of them are actually very reflective, and also they value recovery
because
and all
it's
these kind of things.
part of education, as you said. It's like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
part of role models. I mean, if you're knowing some of them, and they also have the best medical clinic at Sebenerstraße. I can just say, it's like the MRIs and stuff. It's like really, it's amazing. But I think the aspect of valuing recovery wasn't always there in soccer, because also the thought leaders that were currently active didn't really embrace that. But nowadays, if we look at somebody like Cristiano Ronaldo, I mean, who's a whoop who's like embracing recovery and like even like sleep and everything. So you have role models. Now in entrepreneurship, like we didn't really have that, right? And so we're thinking about, why is it that professional athletes get older and older during their career? World records are broken every year. So they are more performant as human beings, same body, same mind, like, and CEO changes in startups, number of CEO burnouts, going crazily up, mental health issues, everything. And so the question is, why in the world did nobody have the idea that every it's like professional sports, right? I mean, Netflix even had it in their values of like, we're professional sports, but nobody treated the people like today professional athletes are treated. So I think that's the whole concept. I think and it goes broader than the Job Foundation, is that every entrepreneur, if they don't learn to take care of themselves, they will not sustainably perform. That means, what does this mean? Like, if you burn out as a CEO, 50% with a 50% probability your startup will fail. Complete write-off. So then I can tell you a story about succession. That's probably a whole podcast, but it's the whole thing is, you're just not helping the company if you burn out. That's, I think, even if you can't do it for yourself, then just do it for the company, because the company will be in a very bad space if you're kind of leading that thing, and then you're from one day to the other, you're gone and you're the face of the company. That's not great. I think there are fundamental basics of that. If you talk about performance or health or well-being, the fundamentals are, take care of your body, mind, soul. Okay, what does body mean? Okay, sleep. Number one, prioritize your sleep. It's takes discipline, sure, but it's your body will love you for that, and you will see that mental clarity and that energy that you get once you have a good sleep. You feel like reborn. And so the next thing is nutrition, right? Nutrition is like what you feed in, is like you will feel. Do you feel great once you had a wine in the evening? Probably not too great. If you eat a lot of fat, if you're constantly overeat, probably not so great. If you just ask your personal AI assistant what is a good nutrition plan that fits into a schedule of somebody who is really busy. Because I'm not saying, hey, please all build your veggie gardens and go every day, cook for 3 hours consciously your own meal. You can do that. That's great. Probably you're in retirement mode, and that's and I embrace your life. So, but ultimately, as a young founder, it's about choosing probably on Uber Eats the most sustainable, healthy solution. But that's doable. You can do those 3 clicks. I think you have that mental capability and capacity as a founder. And then number 3 is movement, right? If you move, we are not meant to sit all the time, right? We are meant to move our body. That's in our genes. And this doesn't mean that you should be weightlifting every day. You can do that. Great for your body, but there is even there, it's simple. Move your body a little bit. As a founder, it will serve you. It gives you more clarity, more vitality, and your energy level will rise. So all those things, recovery is not something that distracts you. It's something that charges you. And I think this is what people just misunderstand. But once they make the experience, they're like, yeah, for sure, I feel the difference. And then I think that's the physical, and we call it about simple mental clarity tools, emotional clarity tools you can do. Everybody has its own stuff. You can do breath work, you can do meditation, you can do a nature walk, maybe it's a conversation, whatever floats your helps you to get that clarity and focus back. And that's essential. I mean, we're not computers, we're human beings. And I think once people understand that, then they will feel the difference. And once you feel the difference, you feel, oh, I have a different energy level. And then it doesn't feel like training yourself to the office. Rather, you want to go because you want to create, because once your cup is full, you want to share.
Amazing. I talked last week to a, let's say, wellness recovery founder from SF, and we were talking about this aspect of recovery, and he was actually mentioning a podcast that he listened to with the coach of LeBron James. And he was asked, the coach, hey, how do you make sure that LeBron performs at such a high level for such a long time? And he says, we really look at what LeBron does outside of the practice and the pitch recovery. That's the thing we look at the most.
Because
It really is important.
But you don't get credit in every sense, because I mean, this is just a misperception. I mean, the people like the most wealthy people, and I mean, they value that. They know that it's not something that's something that they don't appreciate, or that they don't have constant like support systems. I think a lot of them actually start having that. Maybe we just don't talk about it enough, and that's the mistake, because that creates the wrong perception that when you are in your 20s, you need to burn yourself out, otherwise you're not a good founder. Sorry, I mean, this is I think every athlete, everybody who leads global companies, and I think we can elevate that discussion even, that's why I said, outside Europe and to a bigger audience of leaders. Everybody who leads needs to focus on self-leadership in terms of, and that includes recovery, because then you will ultimately become the best performing version of yourself, but maybe not for 3 years, maybe for your whole life, and maybe in different roles. But once and I think the downside, and I'm not coming from that energy of scaring people, but I have seen others that have created in themselves severe issues through that startup journey that won't heal. And I think that's my call to action. It's like, you can be 29, you can be a multimillionaire, but if you're not healthy, that's not great. It's like, there's more important things in life. And if you achieve, and I think you can achieve actually more and more sustainable if you focus on those aspects, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. And I love the Founders podcast. Not sure if you know it, but if you look at biographies from successful entrepreneurs, a lot of them takes time, takes decades to build something, right? So, I mean, you hear a lot of people, maybe also in my surrounding, in the business school, it's about earning a quick buck and being rich and being happy.
I mean,
that's not how life looks like. I think it's
and even if you to pull yourself in that version of Tobi in 5 years, you made a quick buck, you have like 15 mil on your bank account.
What do you do then?
And now what? It's like,
exactly.
It's like you have a nicer car, maybe outside. You maybe have a different, you have a stronger internet connection. You have a
that was a good one.
But you have a bigger house and stuff. Ultimately, you will not be fulfilled. Look, I went through this journey. I was like, I bought a lot of fancy stuff. It never makes you sustainably happy. And I think this is that's the thing. What really fulfillment comes from inside, and that means you have a purpose. You feel that purpose, and maybe this purpose can be for a couple of years to sit down, meditate, like Michael saying for myself.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, it's creating and touch and being in service. I think is the highest form that you can do, and just feel happiness inside. And imagine, like, now I know a lot of people that have way more wealth than I have. Just try to go into that imagination. Now you go into that imagination, say you have everything, but try to go in the imagination when you have everything that you have nothing. And if you can still be happy, like authentically happy, because you're really grateful for who you are and your family, your relationships, the essential things of life, then I think these are the most fulfilled people. You don't need that, but it's nice to have it, right? It's not, I'm not saying it's like gift yourself away, gift everything you earn away. But I think ultimately that's also quick bucks. I have not seen any company that creates sustainable impact for humanity and the planet that was just built in 3 months, right? And I think this is kind of the essence. If the company is a good company and provides value to your customers and a bigger impact for society, guess what? You will make a lot of money and you have a lot of abundance. And that's amazing for you. And you can celebrate that and you can, um, and you have everything wrong. But the bigger part of fulfillment is the first part, that society impact, because that will go way longer if you touch some people's lives or change some people's lives or let the environment in a different way than you being a multimillionaire. It's great if you have both, but that's amazing.
I could go on asking questions for a long while, and I haven't managed to go through all my questions. But anyways, could you give us maybe quickly also an overview of your, let's say, what's top of mind right now for you? What's the mission right now? I know you're working on the Yope Foundation. What's top of mind right there? What's top of mind for your non-profit endeavors? And ultimately, what's top of mind in life right now? Maybe run us through what excites you most right now.
Okay, I think ultimately for me it's about, yeah.
And what role does spirituality actually play in this context? That would be interesting.
Okay, now we did another podcast. It's like, no, it's like I have to. No, I think, look, we are like, I personally have found in that journey towards a deeper connection to myself. Call it God, call it universe, call it creator, whatever you like, right? But a deeper connection. I think I found spirituality in that and also that in those near-death experiences and other experience I had in my life, all in a natural form. So I never took any kind of psychedelics or anything. But I felt that connection. That connection, I think, is gave me that perspective of, look, I'm a human making an experience here on the planet. And then ultimately, human experience is both sides. It's a duality, right? It has good and bad, but the question is just, how do we see it, right? And so I had what people would say, oh my God, things happening in my life. But I'm grateful for them. And truly, because they were all part of my life today, my presence. And I have a deep, I would say, spiritual practice every morning for myself, just to reconnect me to that energy, because that's, I think for me, that's just the most severe and deepest fulfilled experiences. And so coming from that, then okay, I'm a human, I'm a soul here making a human experience. Now, what do I do with that? And and then it's about, okay, I am in service. So now what does this mean? The Yope Foundation is in service of the next generation of entrepreneurs. Somehow my own journey and trying to help people in the next generation that want to do good things for the world to have a better, let's say, better starting point. And so that's kind of the service of next generation entrepreneurs. I'm on the advisory board of a company called Leaders in Purpose that's more helping the global CEOs of the world, redefining what leadership in a big impact can mean. I am helping a nonprofit. I set up one nonprofit called Earthchild that you can look. This is really taking care of children, helping them to learn in school meditation, yoga, veggie gardening, the connection to sustainability, to gardening basically in their school day to day in the worst places of the world. Working with a couple of I think 10,000 children or so every day. And then we working with an organization where I'm helping and donating a sea change that's focusing really on the impact of our kelp forest. So that's kind of non-profit things, serving also still on the board of KONUX, but and then having my basically family office thing that I set up to invest in impact startups that are doing something good for the world. And so that's more that for-profit part, and building something new in the field of AI and consciousness that you will hear about in Q1.
Okay, interesting. But you
Yes.
cannot disclose anything yet.
No, I
But
can
that
just
would be
discuss
very
that I'm like so much into like AI is such a great tool, but why isn't it in service of humanity and the planet? Why is it pulling distraction? Why it's used to distract human beings instead of
absolutely.
creating abundance for human beings? And so this is why that's kind of my mission and that's my main focus currently. Besides those all those other things where I'm more in a service function.
Andy, that's amazing. I mean, I started off actually with this podcast focusing more on the business of health and wellness, because I'm also using this podcast to find myself and whatever excites me. But now I've transitioned more into the direction, okay, how do you actually build ventures for tomorrow's consumer? Or how do you build ventures that make the human experience more human, right? And I can resonate with a lot of these things. I mean, obviously, the health and wellness business, to an extent, wants to contribute to that. Although there are also businesses that are maybe creating, again, more anxiety than better human experiences. But that's ultimately what excites me, right? How do you build things that actually serve humanity? I mean, it's tough to also speak it out. It's really something, but it's really exciting.
No, I think this is, I think that's it's super exciting, and I think there was never a better time to build a business, right? AI is just giving you the tools, but the question is, where do you fuel that energy? Do you fuel it to sell somebody the next thing, or do you really uplift and elevate humans? And I think that's the fundamental question of that time. Is it consciously used? Because it's a tool. It's not good or bad. It's just human consciousness decides, like fire, right? You can heat up your house and cook a nice meal, or you can burn cities. You choose.
Absolutely.
Human consciousness.
Absolutely. Andy, final question. I know you've had tons of mentors, and I mean, I'd love to hear more about those mentors and what lessons they gave you. But what message or what lesson would you like to share with the audience, or with someone who's also trying to build something, create something, whatever it may be a company, maybe anything else? What would you like to share with someone young who wants to
Yeah, thank you.
build
This is
something?
the deepest and as an embodied experience that and lesson that I learned is believe in your own destiny. Because if you believe in your own destiny, everybody else will. If you don't believe in your own destiny, nobody else will. And I think that's the fundamental of every entrepreneur, everything you do in life. If you believe, if you come to that mental state that you believe that you can do it, you will attract everything to do it. Like everything will come into your life. If you don't believe it yourself, it just won't work. Because why should other people give their energy to something that you don't believe? So but the big message is just start believing in your own destiny and everything will follow.
Amazing. Andy, incredible podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Lots of love. The way you
Yeah,
always
lots
send
of
your emails.
love. That's the thing, right? If you ask me what is the biggest power of that universe, like love. That I think could be the next important message. If you build with love, then you will see that everything will fall into place. But first, to really love something, right, you have to also believe that it exists.
Absolutely.
Or can exist.
100%. Amazing, Andy. Wishing you all the best on
Amazing.
those missions, and I'm very curious to see
Thank you.
what you will be coming up with beginning of next year, what we will see, and yeah, hope to see you
Yeah.
soon.
Well, hope to see you soon, Toby. I wish you the most beautiful day and enjoy Switzerland.
Thanks.
Bye bye.